Happy birthday to you this morning. If it's your birthday, why not? Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain. What's up?
It's a power of Fridays. That's what Fridays can do to you. Good morning and welcome.
Yes.
Indeed. Happy celebrations to you. Whatever it is you're celebrating today can't always be bad news, can it?
Of course not.
So thank you for staying with us. I'm Maupe Yusuf.
Well, somebody's certainly in their element this morning. It's good to know. Share the love. Good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Koka.
Just in case you are the one Chamberlain is sending it to, I wish you a happy birthday as well. Amaya Makinde, today is August 18 and you are welcome to the program. I'm Ayo Makinde. Well, while you are celebrating your birthday, some people are not particularly having fun in Kano State, and you know it's a concern that many parents have had. There is going to be increment in everything.
You know, that time of the year,
yeah,
or that time of the quarter when parents.
No, it is the time of the year.
Palpitations.
You just have to start preparing for it from January. But there is no way anything you prepared for in January could have prepared you for what is happening right now, especially in terms of school fees, which concern the Kano State government has shared, and consequently mandating the suspension of school fees increase for private schools operating in Kano State. The schools are also expected to renew their operating licenses in line with the governor's policy on quality education in the state. Well, is this laudable? Most certainly. But then how significantly that will affect everything else? We have to commend the fact that at least the governor or the government is thinking in that direction to ensure that not only do we keep children in school and consequently not increase the number of out-of-school children, be it in private or public schools. The interesting thing here and how this is going to go is how will this affect the quality of education, the general lifestyles of the people, because I would expect that the increment in school fees is something that anyone would guess, hey, it's just going to happen anyway, something that everyone suspected would happen. And even though the government, as you rightly pointed out, Bukola said, it is something that is on the interim. For how long? How long is this interim going to be? It is a cause for concern, no doubt. Is government going to give some kind of palliative to the schools as well to ensure that, I mean, out of the 5 billion naira that they are getting, each state is getting, they're getting something from it. Bukola, you remember we spoke yesterday about the fact that the monthly allocation to states have increased.
Absolutely.
To that increase, this 5 billion naira that is being proposed now, how much of that will any of that go into the schools, to help any of the schools, you know, remain in business and stay afloat as well as possible? Because the quality of education is one thing that we shouldn't in any way, manner, shape or form compromise. How will this affect anything? Kudos to the government, however, don't forget you call them private schools. That means they are private sector practitioners. So how will this affect everything else down the line? I guess one way to see.
Yeah, very, very instructive there, Ayo. Well, to pick up from the point that, you know, one must commend the state government for being responsive, you know, for being sensitive to the needs of the people, particularly, you know, parents who have to bear the burden, you know, of paying school fees at this material point in time. But you must also ask how this will impact on, you know, the quality of service that will be delivered in those schools. How will it impact on the morale, you know, of workers in those institutions? That's also very, very important, because the realities they are facing, you know, is just the same as, you know, that being faced by every other Nigerian across the board. When you visit all your usual retailers, you know, you always meet with that surprise. Everything, every service, every product is, you know, gaining in cost, you know, that you have to pay for it. So what alternatives are available to parents in that state, i.e. the public institutions? You know, so has, you know, have fees been slashed, or is there free education in public institutions in Kano State? Those alternatives must be made available to them as well, because the government must also be sensitive to the needs of the workers in the private education institutions in Kano State.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to note that it's temporary. It's not a permanent, but there should be a time frame for it, because everything that the cost of operation, the goods that they require, they're buying it at high falutin costs, across the state and across, in fact, the states of the federation, not just Kano State. Everyone is faced with this harsh reality at this point in time.
Add to that, whether or not the state government is still going to continue to collect the rates and the levies and fees that the schools must pay. For instance, in a good number of states, they pay for the billboards, advertising, costs that they have to pay. Are they going to pay for that? And while we're expecting that they're going to renew their operating licenses, are they still going to pay for that? If all of that is still going to happen.
Oh, definitely. They must pay for their.
If all of those
for the renewal of their licenses, but will there be a rebate? Will there be a consideration on
those are
that will be seen in reduction?
Absolutely. So while all of that is good, the initiative is most certainly commended. Dear Kano State government and dear state governments across the nation, doing everything you can to make sure that the states in which you operate remain peaceful and all. Please also factor in that maybe there are some costs need to be suspended in the interim. Guys?
Well, while you guys were having the conversation, a Yoruba proverb came to my mind. At some point, I was like, hey, now you're hitting the nail on the head. Well, that's the only way I can translate it. Now you're talking. Because when Buki first of all said, let's commend the state government, I ain't commending the state government. Yeah, it might mean well, but certainly that cannot be the way to go about it. Because if you say that there is government schools and private schools, that you must find a way to know how to, manage the balance. There is a model, there is a template through which or by which private schools operate. Did the state government ever regulate the fees that private schools charge? So since when did they start telling them when to increase and when not to increase? You didn't even say, oh, you cannot increase beyond a certain price band. I mean, I don't own a school. I don't own a school in Kano. So I have no interest in making a case for the owners or the proprietors of schools in Kano. But it doesn't sit well with me that, private business owners, are they regulating any other part? Are they telling people who sell tomatoes and foodstuff in the market that, oh, you cannot increase your... Have they been able to do that? So why do they think that they now have a right to tell private school owners, whether or not they can increase their school fees? You're not even having a conversation with them as to, if you're going to do so, given the current circumstances, let us look within this band. It should not be more than this particular percentage. Because for me, I mean, I listened to the commissioner there, and he was reeling out what the state laws say about what schools must comply with if they're going to raise school fees, and they must have a conversation with the parents of the students in their schools, etc. But he's now even saying, you know what, we are saying suspend all of that and don't even increase at all. According to which law, sir? That law obviously is not clear. And as you can hear from the proprietors, I'm sure that they already have their worries. I mean, they too will be concerned as to whether or not, if they increase, will parents be able to afford the fees? They want to be able to keep as many of the children in their school. If it's way out of control, they know that, those parents will go and look for alternative schools for their children. That is what happens. That's what happens with the law of demand and supply. That's what happens when, price is too high. So somehow water tends to find its level in a well-regulated system, or when market forces are allowed to compete. As you said, they might have a good intention, but that cannot be the way. And then, Ayo, you suddenly raised a very, very vital point, because as they were saying, oh, you know what, you cannot increase school fees, they were also saying, please come and renew your licenses. And nobody heard anything about a rebate there. So I think that there needs to be, the state should not be overbearing in terms of how it goes about its conversations or its orders, because it sounded more like an order. It didn't seem like they had a conversation with the proprietors of those schools. It didn't seem like they had any sit down with them. And then for me, what is most paramount is teachers' welfare. In all of this, I know that, yes, schools have all the things that they have to buy, teaching materials. These days, it seems a lot of schools no longer use chalk. They use whiteboards and pens, etc. And those things might have gone up, especially as we do not produce a lot of those things here, which really is a missed opportunity for all of us when we look at the fact that these things are now in demand, and year in, year out, schools must buy this thing. So we need to look into how it is that we can produce a lot of what it is, the consumables that our schools are in need of. But beyond that, you also must note that the teachers who are going to be teaching the students in those schools, they're not robots. They're human beings. And if their salaries, we know that oftentimes the take-home of many teachers in private schools is very poor. It's really nothing to write home about. And you know that they're just doing the work sometimes or many times out of the passion that a lot of them have for children, or sometimes because there is no other work to do and nobody wants to sit idle. So I'm thinking that if there's going to be a consideration for teachers' welfare, where are proprietors and proprietresses supposed to get those monies from? When they say, oh, hold on all increments, I'm not trying to say that proprietors cannot, figure out how to, improve the welfare or ease the suffering of their own teachers in spite of the circumstances. But one would also think that one of the considerations will be through the, increment of school fees, perhaps with an agreement, because that's where the conversation with parents come in, that a certain percentage of whatever it is that parents are able to pay, will definitely go towards teachers' welfare. I think that conversation needs to happen again. And I think that it is quite shameful that the Kano state government admits that a lot of the people who go to these private schools are the children of civil servants. Whatever happened to government schools? Whatever happened to saying, we're working assiduously to make sure that the state of government schools is what it is that our civil servants will be proud to send their children to? Whatever happened to that? I'm hoping that will be one of the considerations for the Kano state government, that we want to, I don't want to say make markets bad for private schools, but but indeed, maybe make sure that that's not a business that we're all thinking of going into, that, government schools are so good that, there will be no need for a lot of people. If you want to consider a private school, it will be because, you have your special preferences. It shouldn't be because government schools have fallen, the standards have fallen so badly that nobody wants to send, their children to those schools.
Well, there are several perspectives to this and several unclear aspects of this policy, because, some of the proprietors who were spoken to did say they had a meeting with the SA to the governor on private schools. He didn't tell them about any increase. He said they should ensure parents are paying fees. That was what some of them said. And then in another breath, you then hear this one. So, in fact, the proprietor who was interviewed did say the process that some of us undertake before any increment is we have a PTA meeting. We'll tell the parent what's going on before we come up with those prices. That's a measure they say they undertake. And then this 2014 law, I'm yet to actually see details of that and what it entails. But the reality is that, look, it's going to be good if across board they have this mechanism that they ensure they regulate prices so people don't arbitrarily hike prices, because that's what we see in this part of the world. You go to the market today, you see a certain figure. You go there sometimes a day after or 2 days after, most recently as a matter of fact, and it's skyrocketed. And then they just feel they don't owe you any explanation. And it's all the more difficult and challenging when they see government authorities, they also hike their prices, and they feel, look, well, what are the government to tell us? Because, everything stems from petrol. So if it's gone up that much, how are we supposed to transport ourselves? Some of us are in rented buildings, and I don't think the state government wants these schools closed, because the implication of that is if they can't run the schools anymore, they shut down. And then you have further contribution to the army of idle people on the streets. That is not what the state wants. So they have to have this balance. proper conversation, because some of them say, look, we only read it in the news. That's all we know about it. So the handling of this has got to be properly done because of these questions and loose ends that exist. We all like to see these things regulated. Property industry, several areas, artificial pricing. We want to see a lot of regulation, but the reality at the moment is if they ask them, renew your licenses, okay, don't increase, and then you see some things are not exactly clear. But yes, it's going to be utterly important that they ensure that themselves, school operators are on the same page. And by the way, guys, high school fees doesn't necessarily translate to quality education. We've seen this and we know this. So that's on the one hand. But we'll hope that there'll be a lot more clarity on this kind of policy of the government moving forward, such that at the end of the day, these kind of things are not more confusing than clear intentions of government. So we'll look forward to seeing all of that. All right, so that's it. Let's take you through some of the dailies here. We know that that announcement was made yesterday about the palliatives. We've also seen some responses across board concerning how the governors will handle it. Some of them don't trust the governors. In Labour, for instance, they've been speaking of, they think, oh dear, state governors handle this. You know, how else will it go? I mean, several people will have to be involved. In fact, the government has to be involved in this. But we'll talk about all of those. Got to the program here today, and of course, you know, we always like your perspective on the matter. But I'm going to start with Vanguard today. Had that meeting yesterday, ECOWAS, and so this stems from that. We'll invade Niger if diplomacy fails. ECOWAS. Whoa. So that's what you see here. And of course, you know, there's several people who don't quite agree with their perspective. But it's a democracy. If majority say, let's go, and minority say, don't go. That's what you'll get. Look at the right. It says, past deployments in Sierra Leone, Liberia, others, example of readiness. Germany backs EU sanctions against military junta. WFP calls for free flow of aid amid ongoing crisis. We understand Germany also have some troops in Nigeria, alongside the States, alongside Italy, or France. Just a lot going on.
Why are they all come to that? You might want to ask. Very big question to ask.
Oh dear.
But it's a very interesting scenario in Niger, and I think that whatever it is that that ECOWAS decides, however it is that they decide to go about it, will certainly set a template for what happens in other countries. Because if you look at what has happened with Burkina Faso, with Mali, with all the other states that have carried out coups, you have to ask, the conversations that have been happening, the talks, the negotiations that have been happening, what have they yielded? So have they been deterring enough for other countries not to do it?
Food for thought, I reckon. So, but look at what's at the bottom strip of the paper. Subsidy removal. FG shocked over high food transportation costs.
They're shocked.
Yeah. So wait, you're shocked that they're shocked? Okay. You see how that's working? Oh boy. All right. So lots of shocks all over the place this morning.
People say that our leaders are far removed from reality sometimes. you just cannot help but, you know, I mean, you're shocked.
But you know,
what's shocking them?
I think they'll have to read this. Let's see which of the FG who spoke here, because didn't the president speak to us the other day in that speech, which came through? Trying to look at the date now, July 31st, 7:30 p.m., where he spoke about, yes, we know there are some pains. We know you had to bear the birth pangs, the pains out there, but bear with us. We will do something. And now they say FG shocked over high food transportation costs. You have to read this and find out who is this FG.
You know, that's why we need to have more women in position. Because I can tell you, if a woman were the leader, she will not be shocked. She will know what's going on. Trust me. In many households, men are far removed from what is happening in the market.
No, I don't think it's a function of gender in this case.
Sometimes gender counts.
Several men are not shocked.
And I'm sure if I do a poll, a lot of women will agree with me.
Okay, do the poll. Let's see. Do the poll. Until the poll comes, I'll hold my peace.
A lot of women will agree with me that their partners or husbands are far removed.
Wait a minute.
From what exactly
you know you're shocked that government is shocked. The same way everybody is shocked that government is shocked.
I have a consensus right here in the studio, so let's not even go there. So maybe we should have more women. We should have more women in because shocked. That's how the other day we heard the former SGF. Remember, he went around government hospitals during COVID and said, we knew they were bad, but we didn't know they were this bad. Women must go to hospital and give birth to babies, mustn't they?
But don't the women tell their husband what they face when they go back to
but sometimes I don't think they understand.
So if they don't tell them, that's why they'll be shocked.
They don't understand.
Okay. Well, look at this. Approves. Oh, well, that's not just that. I think the writers, it's the same thing all over the place. So that's Vanguard this morning, guys.
Well, Daily Trust has also focusing on Niger as well. The lead story says Niger, AU opposes military action as ECOWAS readies forces. You find details on page 4 of the paper. Mao's suspension, protests in Ghana, recruitment drive of volunteer fighters in the army. The story is on page 4 of the paper. Very interesting situation. They're still keeping the searchlight on Niger and the situation right there. I'm sure the leaders were wondering, hold on, Burkina Faso and Mali did their own coup. The pressure wasn't this much. Why is our own different? I don't know.
Whoever is caught. Not everyone that is caught. So
okay, well, I do hope that ECOWAS can keep up the pressure. Even if they never invade, I sincerely hope that the military leaders feel uncomfortable enough to set date for the return of constitutional authority in that state. But take a look at all the other stories here. Bribery allegation hits up Kano Election Petitions Tribunal. Staff induced with 10 million naira. Somebody speaking there. MBA demands identity of indicted lawyers. That's also there. And Kano government APC trade words. The story is on page 14 of the paper. This is extremely dangerous, and I think that eyes need to be on the situation in Kano, especially with regards. In fact, all election petition courts, all eyes need to be.
We eventually heard that they denied. Person denied and said no such thing.
Well,
any smoke without fire?
I sincerely hope that there is no fire here and that there will be no smoke as well. But this is certainly not very palatable. Look at all those other stories here. Palliatives. Federal government approves 180 billion naira for states. We're back to the situation whereby states are being loaned some money. They're supposed to pay back these monies. The question is, will they? Because we also know that during the Buhari administration as well, states were given some loans. Did they return those monies?
Well, government will deduct it from source if they accepting that there must be terms and conditions before they accept it. So if they accept it, they know this is part of the consequences. So who knows?
Oh dear, look at this. Oh, look at this. Look at this. This is I don't even know which one to take first, but this is very grievous because this is about our military. It says military says 3 officers, 22 soldiers killed by terrorists in Niger. This is within our country. This is not Niger. This is Niger State. Page 23 is where you'll find details. Nigeria complex, but not too difficult to manage, as according to Tinubu. Take a look at this one. See what I'm saying? Abuja housewife bursts into tears as barrow pusher escapes with her foodstuff. Yeah. Really, really sad. I can only imagine how the woman must feel. I mean, now if you have any foodstuff in any wheelbarrow or any wheelbarrow pusher is helping you, keep them within eye reach. Don't let them be going in front and you are still somewhere at the back, thinking that they're still keeping the trust. Hunger is pushing people to do all manner of things these days. So please just be careful. This is really very sad. I mean, how do you explain this to your a partner if she has one? What if she's a single mom? Well, let's leave it there for Daily Trust.
Really sad. So many sad stories. That's why it's instructive, to keep our head above water. This is not chairing anyway, but important to bring it to your notice as well. This lead story on the front page of Leadership newspaper, this is how it's captioned: smuggling operational costs threaten rice production in North. It's a page 4 read, but let's run through the infographics for you. 188 million naira, a firm in Adamawa, Shamad Concept, lost 188 million naira worth of rice. And then the next one right under that one says 40%. According to rice millers in Taraba, their activities have dropped. And the same goes for the other states, where, according to this infographic, the price of a bag has jumped from 12,000 naira to 37,000 naira per bag. And this is moderate. This is really, really, on the average, considering how much it is sold in other markets across the state. And the one under that says rice production in Kwara State dropped from 60,000 metric tons in 2020 to 25,000 metric tons in 2022. And of course, the impasse at the borders with Niger is also contributing to this as well. I recall the other day we read a mail from one of our esteemed viewers where they said that, a truckload of onions was murdered at the borders, and in fact, the product had begun to perish. That's really sad. But that's the reality on our hands. Let's go above the nameplates to see what seems to be hope on the horizon. Rising food prices, FG okays 185 billion naira for states, FCT to buy grains. So where are they going to be buying that quantum of grains from? We have on the list rice, we have maize, and another product. So agriculture, what's the current fate of agriculture? Can it meet the need that will have to be covered in this mass purchase, or we're going to be looking to neighboring states to buy?
Well, the federal government has declared an emergency on food security. Well, we're waiting.
Well, the cabinet is yet to be constituted for the implementation of the
news is out that they will be inaugurated on Monday, so we're waiting.
We're waiting. There's this one as well.
And they have to, what's the word now? Hit the ground running.
And there's this one also beside story on rising food prices. Katsina government approved 7.8 billion naira to tackle banditry. That's cheery to note, considering that the Northwest is being overrun, by the activities of these gangs. Only yesterday we heard the Chief of Defense Media Operations briefing, and giving that very sad story about the number of men that we have lost to the dual attack in Niger State. I believe there are reports that Shiroro has become danger zone as a result of this. And I can't forget in a hurry, the Katsina governor asking the NBA to call their members to order for granting bail to bandits and rapists. Lawyers must do their jobs, but I think a line should be drawn in representation this time around, considering, the consequences in myriad forms of the activities of bandits in Nigeria's north, the entire stretch of the north. Let's leave it there for Leadership Friday.
Well, you forgot to tell Marquette to keep their consensus in Abuja about that consensus. Let's just keep it there. Now, the next paper says FG is lawless. I didn't say it. It's the lead story of the Daily Times newspaper this morning, and it is ascribed to a judge. And you'll find the details right there on the front page. It continues on the inside pages. It says, for lack of respect for court, no response from government counsel. Find the details of that in the paper. Right above the nameplate, palliative, 0.1 million bags of rice, 40,000 of maize per state underway, 180 billion naira handed states for purchase. Well, does that in any way answer some of your questions?
No, there's still so many questions.
Well, because there is no one to ask.
The administration of this palliative.
There is no one to ask those questions yet, so calm down, okay?
We're waiting.
But the sad story that we highlighted the other time about the loss of 22 soldiers, others, to terrorists in Niger by military authorities is also on the front page. Vow tit for tat. I'm so concerned right now about their families of the deceased. I'm so concerned about it. Yes, they knew that these things will happen, but it's never a good news to hear. I'm so concerned about them. Okay, right beside the picture, experts set agenda for new minister amid distress. Former envoy Brace Soludo over treatment of PWDs. Find the details of that on the inside pages of the Daily Times newspaper. That's the paper today.
All right, Nigerian Tribune is the next one we've got for you here. Palliatives. States get 5 billion naira each, 185 trucks of rice. And then you see the writers say, NEC constitutes ad hoc committee to dialogue with Labour, laments dwindling foreign investment inflow. You know, much as we don't encourage people to rely or fly with a headline, just, you know, try and read the body of the story, understand the context. But at the same time, I mean, if you look at this, because this is part of what the story is, if they're lamenting dwindling foreign investment flow, there'll be several questions. I don't understand why they will lament. What are they lamenting about? In the first instance, I mean, this is what happens if you play politics with everything. If you play politics with data, if you play politics with getting the right people who will run or administer certain things in different areas. This is what happens if you don't ensure you have a proper business environment, because look, investors, they will look at those figures. They don't look at your politics, contrary to what many people think. They look at your judiciary. Can they get justice in the event of an arbitration? They look at several scenarios. So why would they tell us? Why would they be lamenting? I mean, it's almost as clear as daylight that, look, these are direct consequences of some of these actions. When you highlight some of these, in fact, when you present data to some of them, they argue, say, no, this data is not reliable. What is your own data? They can't show you. So then you lament foreign investment flow, lack of it. Then ensure that your local investors who are there, do something about those local investors. Don't strangulate them with all sorts of stuff. I mean, go to the streets almost everywhere these days. Abuja, for instance, you see different people chasing cars and harassing cars. Where is this tax? Where is this levy? Is this Banana Republic? What's going on here? Then you get to Lagos, they could clobber you if you're not careful. They demand certain things. And they think that nobody can arrest them. Nobody can do anything because they feel they're above the law. So several perspectives. Then you lament foreign investment flow. They look at these things first, in case they don't know. But look, I think they know. They're just putting our legs. They know these things, guys. But at the same time, Ipman, ANED, if you call it ANED, fine. Sheep owners, farmers, others set key targets for Edun, Ekpo, Tunji Ojo, Adelabu, Lokobiri. Tunji Ojo should empower indigenous shipping lines, disburse $700 million CVFF in 6 months. You'd like to know who's saying this. And Edu must ensure fiscal balance, spending efficiency, debt sustainability. Yeah, it's all there. So that's Tribune today.
Very interesting. Just remember, just yesterday, driving through town, and I noticed that VIO now I think they have an app on their phones now whereby they can check through your license plate if your tax is up to date. I just saw them, all of them on their phones looking at. I said, okay, way to go. Not harassing people every time, park. Even when
some of them still harass. I think every other person should do something about that.
Yeah, they should do something about that. Know whether people have paid their, especially if you're going to be stopping cars on the road, at least be able to check those cars. There's a reason why we have number plates. There's a reason why things have been electronic.
Not only cars that they think this car looks good, this car can pay this thing.
Yes, but
there are several other cars.
If your car is posh looking and you have not paid VIO what you're supposed to pay, you have not paid your vehicle clearance tax or whatever it is you're supposed to pay. And I know a lot of government cars don't do that,
Do they check those cars?
They should check
them. That would be
them.
the day. They don't check those cars.
They should check them, then I'll know that they're doing their work.
And they stop a government car. How many VIO have you seen on the road?
VIO, that's over to you now. Can you stop a government car? Can you stop those big SUVs tinted from top to bottom? Do you stop them as well? I'm sure they'll answer that.
Even stop.
They certainly will have. They will have their response to you.
They know they can harass.
Well, The Guardian is the paper I'm looking at for you. And Ayo, I get your message. I know you go to the market, okay? So someone like you cannot be shocked. Maybe you should talk to your compatriots. Maybe they too should go to the market as well and stop being shocked.
Is that your government? Oh dear. I didn't know that bit. It was his government that said they were shocked.
Thank you for
so he is now.
For misinterpreting what it is that I'm saying.
Breaking news for me.
Chamberlain, go to the market. Learn to go to the... I will take you on one of my trips to the market. I will take you.
Wait, who says I don't?
Personally, I will take you.
Ask me the price of alligator.
The Guardian
right
is what
ask
I'm
me. No, ask me.
Of all the things, alligator pepper. Who is it in that? The Guardian is where I'm going to right now. And take a look at what they have on the front page. Multiple, they say, reign of yesterday's men. Does this strike a, I don't know, does this strike a chord with you? Reign of yesterday's men. I know that somebody has said that before. He's back to his day job now. Multiple ex-governors turned godfathers on settled governance in states. And you can see the pictures right there of the godfathers, of the godfathers and their godsons. The story is on page 4 and 5 for you. You have a number of other stories right here. ECOWAS defense chiefs declare readiness to invade Niger. That story is on page 6. Lobbyists storm APC secretariat, beg Ganduje for appointments. That's right there on page 3. And a number of stories at the bottom here. Naira gains about 15% as dealers dump dollar, count losses. Okay.
Dump dollar.
Page 16 is where you get the details. Okay, I'm not very
dumping it.
But this is some good news, something to celebrate. Relief as AIU clears Amushan to participate at World Championships. So she's in the clear. She did say she was going to be vindicated, and she has been. I sincerely hope that this sort of scenario doesn't arise again. We'll leave it there for the Guardian newspapers.
Telegraph, I believe we still have New Telegraph available. It toes the same path pretty much as the other papers this morning with its big story. States FCT to get 5 billion naira each as FG releases 180 billion naira grants loans. And there are just two riders, 52% as grant, 48% loan to be repaid within 20 months. Of course, we saw the governor of Borno State making that clarification yesterday. And we also hear that only 2 billion naira has been released out of the 5 billion naira intervention fund.
Paul asked the question the other time. The one that they got before, have they paid back? Chamberlain also quipped about DFS. I just enjoy calling it DFS, deduct from source. Has that happened? What was the balance?
I think we need to double check and we need to know which one exactly you're talking about.
Exactly. So
okay, there are quite a number of other stories that will interest you this morning, particularly the ones underneath the nameplates. Listen to this. DHQ 3 officers, 22 soldiers killed in Niger, but that's not the big one. The other one is Imo Guba, INEC to request for 2,300 soldiers. It's an election, it's not a war. And where were these soldiers at the critical times they were needed in the northwest and north central part of the country? You know, I can't help but ask that question. And just beside that one, on ending security challenges in Nigeria, disheartening. That's ascribed to the presidential candidate of the Labour Party. You know, there are quite a number of other stories for you, but I'll leave you to do the search and pick this morning on the front page of New Telegraph.
Well, I can't, do away with celebrating that story that you missed out of Amushan being cleared. Disciplinary committee clears to be Amushan for World Athletics Championship. It's very, very exciting news for me. Nigeria News Direct has this one on its front page. Palliatives. Subsidy palliatives. FG approves 5 billion naira grant for states. FCT. Stories on page 22. The writers tell us pretty much the same thing that we heard before. But this one, the hardship of today will birth a better tomorrow. Tinubu encourages Nigerians. Okay, that's the lead of the paper this morning, and right above the nameplate, local content. NCDMB ES hops on structured capacity building to develop in-country capacity. That's the second one right there. And so many other stories, including this one.
You must take that story right beside the big one.
Which one is that? Oh,
the one from
sex allegation.
State, yeah.
Unical suspends Dean of Law. Well, is that the? I understand.
Well,
this is not the last time.
He is innocent until proven guilty.
Well,
but,
yes.
But the messages on the placards, borne by the female law students in Unical were so disheartening. So disheartening to look at. It speaks a lot to what may have been going on in the background.
What we also hear is that this is not the first time that this particular individual would be accused and given this same kind of suspension and all. Does he have some more people in his pockets who can't discipline him as they should? Well, maybe it's about time the NBA or whoever else also swung into action on this.
Or the Senate of the University of Unical, to look into this, constitute a panel and give him a fair hearing. If he's found guilty, perhaps he shouldn't return to that ivory tower.
Absolutely. Well, that's the Nigerian News Direct this morning, and a look at some of the dailies this morning. But we'll be right back to take on the issues as they come. Do stay with us.
It's the third National Economic Council meeting since the commencement of the present administration, and governors from across the Federation and other stakeholders are in attendance. The Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, is chairing the meeting held at the Council Chamber of the Presidential Villa. The meeting goes into a closed door after the national anthem. Few hours later, Governors Yaya Bello of Kogi State, Shey Makinde of Oyo State, Babagana Zulum of Borno State, Charles Soludo of Anambra State, and Ubasani of Kaduna State briefed journalists on some of the resolutions reached, beginning with the preliminary report on the 2022 flood disaster, which claimed over 600 lives.
Only 16 out of the total number of affected states forwarded their submission to NEC Secretariat to date, as expected. About 15 others were yet to do so. There is therefore the need to expedite the release of funds to affected states as recommended by the designated committee constituted by the federal government to that effect. This will go a long way in addressing the needs of the victims as well as offset debts incurred by some states to some citizens.
Some vital resolutions were also reached by the Council to address the difficulties faced by Nigerians in the aftermath of subsidy removal.
The federal government of Nigeria has released 5 trucks of rice to each state last week. Furthermore, in order to cushion the effect of food shortages across the country, the federal government has approved the sum of 5 billion naira to be given to each state for the procurement of 100,000 bags of rice, 40,000 bags of maize, and fertilizers. 52% of this money is given to states as grants, while 48% of the 5 billion naira is to be paid back on an installment basis within a period of 2 years, 20 months to the CBN by the states and the local government areas in Nigeria.
Clarification here is again, 5 billion was actually approved, but until this moment, only 2 billion have been given to the states.
A committee was also set up to interface with organized labor over the fuel subsidy removal. The committee is chaired by the governor of Anambra State, Professor Charles Soludo. The National Economic Council also noted with concern the impact of the crisis in Niger, especially on food security in frontline states, and directed that the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, expedite action on the distribution of food to those who are mostly affected. From the Presidential Villa, Abuja, Empress Simon, Channels Television News.
Talk about some of the issues raised in that report. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today, sir.
Good morning.
Well, that's what we're focusing on these days, the economy. How to get us out of this, quote, doldrums that we are in at the moment. But those measures that has just been announced, how far-reaching do you think it will be?
They are temporary measures. And some of them are quite diversionary. And the people in government have not addressed the root of the crisis, which is the dollarization of the economy. Whatever palliatives that are announced will be eaten up by the dollarization of the economy. And you're not in control. As long as these guys in government are not prepared to strengthen the Naira, to make the Naira the only legal tender in Nigeria, you are not going to go far. And, speaking from a legal perspective, I've had to sue the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Federal High Court, because Section 16 of the Central Bank Act provides, or has imposed a duty on the Central Bank to fix and determine the rate of the Naira vis-a-vis other currency. So there is no provision for floating the Naira. No, there's no provision. It's illegal. To say, the value of the Naira will be determined by market forces. That is not there in the law.
It's not an economic principle that they're adopting?
No! Section 20 of the Central Bank Act provides that the only legal tender in Nigeria shall be, Section 20, subsection 1, the currency notes issued by the Central Bank, only the Naira. Section 20, subsection 5 provides anybody who spends any other currency in Nigeria without the approval of the Central Bank has committed an offense and shall be prosecuted. The penalty is 6 months imprisonment. So you ask yourself, why does a government, a Nigerian government, allow properties to be sold in dollars, rents to be collected in dollars, some school fees to be paid in dollars, and everybody looking for dollars? You want to go to Mecca and Jerusalem, even to pray weekly in Mecca, you look for dollars. Everybody attending conferences abroad, you look for dollars. Estaco. So there's so much pressure on the dollar. All manners of goods. You look for dollars to import them, including goods that are produced in Nigeria. So if the government is desirous to address the distortions in the economy, I have to say, sorry, what is my business with dollars in Nigeria? In fact, if I had my way, and I've said it on this forum before, I will sell oil in Naira. Because it's ridiculous for you as a country to sell your product in dollars. Now, you now have to change dollars to Naira to distribute monthly. So these are the problems. So for me, the government is not addressing this problem.
But when you say that no one shall have the powers to do so except authorized by the CBN, So if CBN then authorizes a chunk of those other transactions, it means that we are within the law.
The government has never, the central bank has never authorized. When I took up the suspended central bank government, I think in 2015 or 2016, why are you allowing, it came out publicly. You can Google. Nobody is authorized to spend dollars in Nigeria. And that is the position of the law. But what is going on now? How can you pay school fees in dollars?
How widespread is this practice? I mean, we will say that maybe that is happening at a level that is beyond the average Nigerian. How widespread is this practice, you think?
Very widespread. The ordinary people are victims of the distortion of the economy. I was in Benin Republic last week with my lawyers. We had an annual retreat. And we spent Naira in Cotonou. Yes. We spent Naira and Sefa. We didn't spend a cent or a dollar.
Yes, but we know that. I mean, that's Benin Republic.
The same thing going on in Niger.
Yeah. So the countries that neighbor Nigeria, we know that in those countries, the Naira is still accepted because of the level of trade that they do with Nigeria. And I know that when we had this Naira scarcity issue, it was one of the problems, one of the things that was highlighted, people talking about how you know, we do not know how much Naira we really have in circulation when you look at the fact that, you know, other countries are also trading in our own currency, and would like, that's one of the points that was given for it. But in terms of, you know, when you say the dollarization of the economy, isn't that happening at a level that is beyond the average Nigerian? And isn't this as an effect of the fact that we're not really producing much and we rely heavily on importation?
No. You know what these guys say? I mean, the central bank says, we want to float the Naira. And the implication is that floating a currency is anchored on supply and demand. We do not supply dollars because the only product that really earns dollar is oil. And the bulk of it now, a lot of oil is stolen. So the government will have to try. How do we stop stealing of oil? Nigeria is the only oil-producing country. We are big-time thieves. Big-time thieves. Steal oil. 2, why should we allow any transaction in Nigeria, right, to be, you know, valued in dollars in your country? And I'm saying, under the law, the legal tender in Nigeria are the currency notes issued by the central bank, and there's no amendment to that law. So I'm not talking politics. I'm talking law. So, and I've challenged the central bank.
Yeah, but isn't this one of the cause and effect of globalization?
No.
Some people argue that that's what it is.
These guys who are talking of globalization are controlling their own economy every day. They ask you here, oh, trade liberalization, allow everything to come in. But China and US, United States of America, are fighting every day over what should come to our country and what should not be allowed. But here, IMF and World Bank, they are pressing the government. Oh, you are looking for the value of the currency. For 45 years, we have been told by these imperialist institutions, the Naira is overvalued. So they have been devaluing the currency through dollarization. So the Bank of America recently said the Naira is now undervalued. But the guys in the central bank are still devaluing the currency. The Naira is looking for its value. I beg your pardon. When I was an undergraduate, the exchange rate was 60 kobo to a dollar. Today, it is about 1,000 naira to a dollar. Except we are told the central bank has now looked for $3 billion. Is it the business of the central bank NNPC to run the central bank?
Yeah, but Mr. Falana, can we really say that floating the Naira is tantamount to dollarization?
Because, for sure.
But many will say floating the Naira means that, yes, the value of the currency will be determined by forces of demand, supply, interest rates, inflation, and it's not just against the dollar. It's against any convertible currency, the pounds, the rand, whichever one, not just against the dollar.
Tambali, I didn't write the Central Bank Act, but Section 16 says it shall be the duty of the central bank to fix the exchange rate of the Naira vis-a-vis other currency, not market forces. You know, it's like this. It's like what they were telling us. I was saying, the price of fuel shall be determined by market force. So it's not possible. It's not possible.
So can the CBN wake up tomorrow and say, well, the exchange of the Naira against the dollar is 300?
That is the duty of the central bank. Oh, yes. That's it. When the man, Mr. Wale Adu, who has now become the Minister of Finance, was in the Senate for screening, what did he say? That the value should be around 700 naira. How did he come to that conclusion? Oh, yes.
Because there are fundamentals that guide that. And one of it will be your forex base, your foreign exchange base. We know that our forex base has been severely depleted in recent times. We do remember...
Depleted for what? To satisfy the stupid demands of the elite. For me as a lawyer, to buy wig and gown from England. For me as a lawyer, to buy, other materials from England. Why? The majority of our people have nothing to do with these dollars.
But this is the reality.
No, it's not. No.
This is the reality. This has been the reality that for many, many years, our tastes have not been within what it is that we can produce.
Those tastes can be controlled now. For instance, there's a president in Tanzania, President John Magufuli. He died during the COVID-19 crisis. He said, told the Tanzanians, for now, all foreign conferences shall be attended by our embassy officials who will send reports to the country. Because we're wasting money on Estacos. Now, a country can do that. In 2020, nobody went to Mecca or Jerusalem because of COVID-19 crisis, pandemic. So I can now say as a government, for the next 4 years, because of the economic crisis, if you have been to Mecca before, you will not be allowed to travel to Mecca. If you have been to Jerusalem, you will not be allowed to go to Jerusalem. Let others, because you cannot, in Nigeria, it's difficult to ban, people going for holy pilgrimage. We can now say, any school that operates in Nigeria, we're going to charge you, we're going to arraign you in court, the management, if you charge $. For anybody who wants to go for a conference abroad, can the government find out how relevant that conference is to the economy?
Any government official or private individual?
Oh yes, government official.
Okay.
And for private individuals, what do you want to import into the country that cannot be produced locally? So this is how you control this rat race for dollars. So you must take control of your economy. So this is it. But the government is not prepared. Why must you allow less than 1% of the population, politicians, professionals, and others, to destroy the economy? Because they are looking for dollars. You want to trade in dollars. You want to sell properties in Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, and other in dollars. It's illegal. You want to collect rents in dollars. It's illegal. We know the schools that are charging dollars. It's illegal. So once you strengthen the Naira, this crisis will be minimized. Then we can then ask ourselves, as a government, National Economic Council, an advisory body, the governors can advise the president. Sorry, sir, we have discovered that we're in trouble. The money we are giving out will not mean much because people are changing money to dollar.
Why are we not seeing several suits against those institutions, if that's the case then?
No, we're in court.
All over the
we're in court. The central bank has no answer. We're in court.
What about, I mean, and some people will say, you know, while this will be laudable, a lot of people will say, but it doesn't have to start from government? Because I know that even when you say, oh, government, why are you people not buying locally produced cars or locally assembled cars? And the question will the companies that are here, the few companies that are assembling the vehicle, would they be able to meet the demand?
No, that's a different matter. We can then create exceptions until we're able to meet the demand. For instance, the Buhari regime in 2020 announced that because of the exchange problem, we can no longer continue to subsidize fuel importation. So what we are going to do is to encourage vehicles to be converted from PMS-run vehicles to CNG. And 250 billion naira was earmarked by the central bank for that. Not a kobo was released for that purpose. So I wrote to the central bank recently, under the Freedom of Information Act, what has happened to the 250 billion naira?
What did you find out?
No, they say, we are looking at our records. Of course, no answer.
Till date?
So we're in court. Oh. So these are the issues the government will have to address. Around Benin Delta, around Edo Delta area, not less than 10,000 vehicles are run on CNG. Because it's eco-friendly, it's cheaper. So why is the government not adopting that? Electric vehicles. Zimbabwe. The Chinese were mining lithium illegally. That country said, sorry, exportation of lithium is illegal. Now, the Chinese are building a factory in Zimbabwe, a $300 million factory. Now, we have lithium in abundance here. And it's been taken away. I mean, just yesterday, a friend was asking me, how can this government appoint Dele Alaki as Minister of Petroleum? I mean, solid mineral. It should be information. I said, do you know the implication? That annually, $9 billion worth of gold is illegally taken out of Nigeria. With according to a former minister, Dr. Oga, through private jets. Private jet. Oh, yes.
$9 billion.
Yes, $9 billion. Gold alone.
They've been able to put a value to it.
Oh, yes. You can Google. I'm not talking of lithium. I'm not talking of other resources. I just handle a case in Osun State. You know, under our Minerals Act, if you are mining gold or any mineral, solid mineral, in my farm, in my land, what does the law provide? 100 naira per acre. I know the law. So you are moving me out of my land. I'm a farmer. This is where I farm. But you said, no, get out of the place. The government has taken over your land. We'll pay you 100 naira. So they were going to give our client 150,000 naira. And they came to us, what are we going to do with this? I said, don't worry, we'll go to court. So we went to court in Federal High Court Osogbo. Oh, the other lawyer said, no, this is what the law provides. I said, no. Section 44(1) of the Constitution says, if you take over my land for public purpose, I will prepare a fair and just compensation. The law, the judge, this man, awarded 250 million naira to our client. But you know what I discovered? Unfortunately, after the case, unfortunately for the company, we discovered that in 5 years, that company will make a profit of $500 million. No tax. Do you run a country that way? And you are asking the poor, tighten your belt. Do you run a country that way? That one company will make $500 million in our country.
Why would there be no tax on it?
No, the government wants to encourage, people to invest in that area. The company will invest only $245 million. And a foreign company, a Canadian company, through a Nigerian, it's a $1 or whatever they call themselves. And that's all. Meanwhile, the state government, the Osun state government, is entitled to 13%
derivation.
Derivation. So this is the problem.
All right, let's bring in our colleagues from Lagos.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Well, Mr. Falana, you know, one of the first questions that naturally comes to mind, you know, when you speak about dollarization, and you talked about the fact that people generally seem to prefer imported things. It's not something that is new. I remember reading an article or a comment by Chief Obafemi Awolowo, which he delivered, a lecture he delivered in London, I think, before the independence, saying that politicians of his day preferred imported stuff to locally made ones. Now, we are still talking about the same thing now, more than 60 years after independence of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So I'm wondering, is there a way that you think we can navigate that situation so that we don't have that same situation on our hands in another 10 years from now? A situation where we tend to prefer imported stuff to locally made ones. There are those who also say, unless we produce at home and export, the Naira couldn't get any stronger. So how do you think we can do that?
Oh, you see, I've just referred to the relevant provisions of the Central Bank Act and also the Constitution, Section 16, has imposed a duty on the government to run the economy in the interest of Nigeria, not in the interest of IMF and World Bank. So if you destroy your currency,
no, Mr. Falana, I'm not sure you understand the question I'm putting to you. Just 1 second, Mr. Falana, if you can hear me. The point is about the political class, about our own habits. Let me also make that a little worse. The previous governments, I think it was Chief Audwogbe sitting before a panel of the National Assembly saying, Nigerians import as peasant issues as pizza from the UK into Nigeria to eat. One meal. So in that way, how do we discourage importation and prefer locally made stuff so we can strengthen the Nigerian currency?
The government is under a legal obligation to control the economy in a way that the happiness of Nigerians, the prosperity of Nigerians will be guaranteed. Therefore, the duty of the government is to ban goods that are produced in Nigeria and also to challenge companies like Zimbabwe has just done. If you want to take lithium out of this country, set up a factory in Nigeria. If you want to sell handsets in Nigeria, set up a company in Nigeria to produce handsets. So unless you are ready to do that, we produce food, particularly foods that are wasted. We can now say we are producing cocoa. And we are telling Ghana, Nigeria, and Ivory Coast, the country that produce cocoa, leading producer of cocoa, insist on establishment of chocolate factories in your country. And if these foreign countries and companies are not willing to do that, simply on your own, set up factories to produce chocolate and export. So the government, that is the duty of the government. Not, I mean, when a minister goes to the National Assembly, oh, these are the problems. So when you go to the Federal Executive Council, what do you discuss? Governors gather in Abuja to say, oh, we want to distribute money. how is the money generated?
So essentially, Mr.
After
Falano,
distributing 5 billion
essentially, Mr. Falano,
what happens?
Yeah, just 1 second.
When you are not addressing the problem?
Essentially, you are saying that we can legislate our way, we can legislate our attitudes. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not talking of we can. We are required to do that.
To legislate,
to say,
to legislate our
we shall
appetites.
no longer export cocoa beans. We shall now establish factories that will produce chocolate, factories that will produce tea. So, and this is what some countries are doing. Again, let me tell you something. Kenya recently went to Saudi Arabia. We are sorry. We are spending $500 million to import fuel into the country. We can no longer afford it. Can you please assist us? Okay, what do you want? We want to pay shillings for the importation of fuel. Okay, no problem. You pay shillings, and we shall use the shillings to import goods from your country to Saudi Arabia. And we have suggested to Nigeria, we have a closer relationship because of religion. So talk to the Saudis. We are having problem raising dollars to import fuel because our refineries are comatose. What can you do for us? It ain't cherry. 2, there are in Nigeria today, and the government has a duty to help to fast track the process of fixing our refineries. And then we have invested in the Dangote refinery, which was commissioned last year. But what has happened to that refinery? The NNPC took a loan of $2.7 billion to invest in Dangote refinery. The land was given free by Lagos. They call it the place free economic zone. Not a dime was paid for the land. The entire machinery imported to the country. Official rate. To import the vehicle, the machinery. Duty free. And then we are told, oh, your contribution to this refinery is 20%. Who quantified our contribution? So these are the issues this government will have to address. There's a body they call AMCON. Even EFCC. These guys will take over an organization. A growing concern, they will then go and put in a red ink EFCC investigation. So, employees are sacked. Nobody wants to do any business with that company. I ask you, what kind of economy is this? It can only be a Kalo economic system. I know a system. I know a company. We have problems now flying in the country. The aviation company, industry is in crisis. These guys, AMCON, they took over Ari 5 years ago, 2017. Ari at that time has 70 aircraft. Some banks had an arrangement with Ari. Oh, you are owing us? Okay. At the counter, passengers who pay to us, we deduct our share of whatever they pay. We'll give you the rest to run the airline. AMCON took over, appointed a senior advocate who has no other than traveling through the air. He had never had any experience with running an airline. So he said, you be our receiver man. The man knew he was running the place at Grant. He said, no, I'm resigning. So they appointed somebody. No court order. The man took over. So they decided to take loans. Decided to destroy the company. 2 aircraft were cannibalized. One valued at $37 million. Another one, $42 million, were cannibalized and sold by a government, a legitimate government. Today, we now discovered that 17 aircraft now has only 2. So we wrote a petition to the SEC. These guys who took over Arik had committed fraud to the tune of $120 billion. EFCC has confirmed and even said, we have confirmed more. Now, what does the government do? The new government says, the president said no. So what is our business as a government with managing debts? The banks are rich enough to sue those who are owing them.
Well, Mr. Falana, Mr. Falana,
the government has decided, the president has decided, we are going to abolish.
Yeah, Mr. Falana, no, your argument in that regard.
So we must look at the way the economy is run in all ramifications. But what is going on?
Indeed, Mr. Falana, your argument in that regard is also a subject of interest.
This is the problem of the country.
Yes, that's also a subject of interest before the APC Professionals Forum. I recall their chairman, Mr. Issa Yuguda, briefing and saying that perhaps the president will also look into that. But your proposal for the crude oil to be sold in Naira rather than dollar is a continuing subject of debate. And I want you to, explain a bit more, particularly when we look at other countries of the world that are trading, that are, crude oil producers. They're also considering other currency rather than the dollar. But what are the politics of international diplomacy that could, be a stumbling block for Nigeria to be unable, to stand up to, the crude oil community, the OPEC and the like, to be unable to counter the dollar?
Thank you. Thank you. Section 19 of the Nigerian Constitution, 19 subsection E, provides that Nigeria shall promote a new international economic order. Article 21 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights Act provides that the economy of Nigeria, the resources of Nigeria shall be mined, shall be exploited in the interest of the Nigerian people. Now, I'm not saying anything alien. Some countries now, and that is the challenge of the BRICS. Brazil, India, Russia, China, and South Africa. That is what they are saying. We want to trade among ourselves interstate in our national currencies. And they're already doing that. 5 years ago, 2018, the Chinese government sat down with Nigeria. The Central Bank of China, People's Republic of China, and the Central Bank in Abuja said, Nigeria, you are buying a lot of goods from China. Can you pay Naira in China? Why for our own business here, we pay yuan? They call it currency swap. And about goods at about $2.5 billion, was earmarked for that currency swap. Again, recently, I had to write to the Central Bank because those traders who are going to China are still looking for dollars. What has happened to this arrangement? Because I confirm the IMF and World Bank told Mr. Emefiele, former suspended governor, don't allow this to succeed. So I wrote to the Central Bank under the Freedom of Information Act. Please, what has happened to the currency swap between Nigeria and China? We should have removed the burden on Nigerians looking for dollars. Central Bank has just written a letter to me. Oh, this process is still on. It's going to be renewed next year. But traders are not aware. So we are going to, through the media, let Nigerians know this process is on. So what these governors, what our governors, through the National Economic Council should be doing, is to say, can we have this currency swap with countries that are ready to trade with Nigeria in Naira? Let us have faith in our own national currency instead of looking for dollars. I've just told you, we were in Benin Republic last week. We didn't have to look for dollars.
Well, Mr. Falana, there's another matter I'd like you to...
Or Naira.
There's another matter I'd like you to weigh in on very quickly. The NNPCL Limited recently, just days ago, secured a 3 billion naira emergency crude repayment loan from Afrexim Bank as an intervention. Yes. Being a privatized company, is it within the purview of the NNPC to make that kind of intervention?
No. The central bank has not been made to realize. And now I hope, now that we have an attorney general who will be inaugurated on Monday, is the NNPC Limited, a limited liability company. The government will have to be told the NNPC Limited is no longer a parastatal. So it has, I've looked at the Petroleum Industry Act. I cannot find any provision that allows the NNPC to take a loan for the central bank. No. No. So the legality must stop in the interests of the country. And you know what they did? Mr. Emefiele, with the approval of President Buhari, without the approval of the National Assembly, too close from GMB and others to show up the Naira because they were looking for dollars to the tune of about $7.5 billion, which has never been added to the loans of Nigeria. No, the Debt Management Office is not aware. The National Assembly is not aware that loans were being taken in 2006. I think that was when the governor of Anambra State now, Professor Charles Soludo, right? The central bank yanked off $7 billion from our foreign reserves and distributed to 14 banks. Again, I had to write to EFCC, please recover this fund. Oh, EFCC was afraid. So I wrote to another agency of the government, Presidential Panel on Asset Recovery. So they wrote to the central bank, oh yes, it is true, but we have forgiven the bank that took the money. I beg your pardon. Okay. Where have you got the power? So please, we now have to let the government know that our country is in crisis.
All right.
How can we save the Naira? All right, we'll dollarization.
Okay, we'll be winding down now, but I see some are raising issues here, which looks like a joke. He says that Bode says he agrees with you, but we need to also check this, which we will. He says this morning, flight tickets from Akure to Abuja are listed in dollars.
Yes.
He says, please check. Well, we will check this. How can this be from Akure to Abuja?
No, that's not possible. I travel that route. If anybody wants to take dollars from me, you know, some of the foreign airlines wanted to try it last year, and we told them it's illegal. Cows shall not do that, and they had to stop. So you cannot do that. So nobody can.
So if it's been done, it's done illegally.
Illegally, any transaction in Nigeria shall be in Naira,
and people must insist.
Yeah.
When yes. You have to insist.
Well, just talking about the effect of, you know, some of these policies, we know, as you said that a lot of the palliatives that are being, well, they might be good ideas, you know, they come to naught when you look at what is happening in exchange to the dollars. And part of what we've seen is also affecting the welfare of people. I think it was just yesterday or 2 days ago that a colleague of yours, Mr. Muiz Banere, highlighted the plight of magistrates in Lagos State. And
not just Lagos.
Yeah.
A magistrate is forced to take a public transport, and a passenger will say, oh, magistrate, I've paid your money. Don't worry to pay the conductor. So, and you are going to appear before the magistrate. The magistrate is living in a house, rented apartment, and rents are increased because of the reverberating effect of the increase in pump price of petrol. So there are problems. But you see, the government is now being forced to abandon its neoliberal policies. We told them. So the government is now forced to say, we are no longer going to increase fuel price.
Yeah.
we are no longer going to do this and do that. Now, that means the government is now beginning to realize that their IMF-sponsored program, World Bank-sponsored program will pauperize the country and increase poverty.
Well, we do not know how long they're putting that on hold for, because I know that they're also in talks with the NLC. But I think for a number of people, whilst people are saying, oh, people need to look for alternative sources of income, we do know that there are categories of people that cannot look for alternative sources of income. A lot of them will include these people in this case are magistrates, judges, people in the security sector, unless, of course, their spouses are able to also, and that's for those who are married. What about those who are not, or those who do not even have any intention of getting married? So do you think that there ought to be special consideration for this number of people? I do know that Mr. Muiz Baranire's article was, quite comprehensive in terms of what needs to be done with the situation of magistrates in Lagos. We saw in Cross River magistrates protesting. I sincerely hope that it doesn't get there. But do you think that there needs to be special consideration for this cadre of people who cannot do any other sort of business because of the nature of their work?
You are talking of the elite. Those who at the end of the month will earn some money. 133 million Nigerians are living below starvation wage, according to the government. Now that number has increased phenomenally. So what I am saying, as long as you continue to dollarize the economy, whatever you pay, and I've made this, I've had discussion with the leaders of the trade unions, NSA and trade unions, TUC, whatever you ask as minimum wage will be destroyed by dollarization. So in your struggle, you must also ask that the Naira be respected by the government, that the Naira be saved by the government. Because, I take out my car and I bought fuel. In a week's time, there is a problem in the international market. The price of oil goes up. The government will be compelled. Sorry, this is the landing cost. You will have to increase to 750 Naira. It was going to that stage, but the government has to say for now, please, NNPC, what can we do very quickly? NNPC, we're going to take a loan of $3 billion. For what? To show up the dollar. And for what are we using the dollar for? For the elite to import goods from abroad. It's not about the country. And we are saying this government must sit down. The people in Abuja, the Federal Executive Council, the governors through the National Economic Council, what are the goods that are produced in Nigeria for which we do not need to look for dollars? Can we stop people from collecting rents in dollars, selling properties in dollars, people going to Mecca and Jerusalem on a regular basis, goods you are bringing from abroad, useless trips? Let me tell you one before we wind up. I was coming from Western Sahara a few years ago. And we were in the Nigerian house in Nigeria. So I liked the house. And when the ambassador was sending us out, said, when did Nigeria build this house? He said, no, it's a rented apartment. He said, Mr. Ambassador, I beg your pardon. We had our first embassy in that country in 1962. So we have been paying rents since 1962. And how much do we pay for this house annually? $800,000. In 10 years, that's $8 million. And that's what happened. Majority of our embassies. So we now have a situation where the government will have to find out what are we using dollars for. Nimasa has just bought 3 properties in England under this regime.
For what?
For what? Not just to take out dollars. So please, let us run this country in the interest of our people. We are not a poor country, but the government is managed in a way that poverty is on the ascendancy.
That speaks to the inefficiency that the government spoke about not long ago. So hopefully they'll probably embark on that Save the Naira and stop the inefficiency campaign so that we can show up the value of the currency. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
All right, we're back in just a moment. Stay on with us. Okay, welcome back. Yes, we've seen Mr. Wale Smart. He's here with us this morning. Wale Smart is the DG Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. So, employers, not employees.
Employers.
Oh, dear. Oh, boy. Okay, where does that leave us? We're out of the equation. All right, thank you for coming on anyways. But
thank you.
The government has announced this measure to see how they could cushion the impacts of the subsidy removal on regular Nigerians. The states appear to be in the driver's seat driving this policy. Do you think this will be, what kind of impact do you see this having?
Well, good morning once again, and thanks for having us. You know, I think good intention, but it still brings us back to the issue of framework. You know, how exactly will the 5 billion, how exactly will it be distributed? For what purpose exactly will the 5 billion be put to? You know, looking at where we were before now and what brought us to this point. You know, the first subsidy removal created a shock that snowballed into many other issues. Now, you cannot be complaining about the effect and feeding the cost. So for us to be, let's look at the first subsidy issue. The removal created increase in transport cost, you know, affected the purchasing power of an average Nigerian worker and the household as it were, and also create different kind of effects in the lives of an average individual. Now, whatever solution we are bringing, for us, we first to address the root cause of it. Will the 5 billion be used to mitigate the effect? You know, the main issue of the first subsidy. Fuel is now hovering close to 600 in some places, close to 700 in some places. Now, will the amount that is being given to the state, will it be judiciously used in such a way that to actually impact the life of those that the government have selected to benefit from those funds? So for us, it's less of the amount, but what exactly is the framework that will be used, that the 5 billion will be used for? If you don't create a framework, if you don't create a path, that 5 billion will trickle down to those that are supposed to get, then you will have created another system.
And the thing is, the federal government cannot, because they say, look, we run a federal system. We can't force down the throat of states how they should do things.
Well, you are the one giving them the money.
Yeah, but grants, which they will pay back, some of them. And so, yes, they expect that the states will have proper framework. So now, aren't we already in a bind? Because we went ahead and removed the subsidy, but there's question about this same framework. Yeah. What is a credible database? How would you ensure that this gets to the very grassroots from then up to people who need it? I don't think you think we'll have this proper framework already.
No, we don't. And those are part of the mistakes or the errors of the last administration. We have many schemes that were created by the past administration without verifiable data. And once you don't have credible data, then you are starting the whole project on a very faulty foundation. And once the citizenry are not aligned, or those projects have credibility issues, then you have set a system where the project is going to fail already. So without that issue, you know, the data that was used for coming up with the poorest of the poor in Nigeria, it's already been contested, not only by labor but also by employers. How exactly do we arrive at that figure? We are touting 133 million Nigerians that are poorest of the poor, multidimensionally poor. How do we arrive? What are the parameters that we used in arriving at those figures? Are the parameters, are they transparent enough for us to know this is actually the amount of persons that are actually poor or multidimensionally poor? And fundamentally, the issue remains the issue of data. Even the issue of fuel consumption, you know, there was contention about how many liters exactly we are consuming. You know, we have an issue where the former Siege of Customs went to the National Assembly to also contest the liters touted by NNPC as consumption per day. So if we don't get the data right, then we have created a system where people can always game the system.
Do you think that, do you actually see proper intention from government across board to come up with data? I ask this because before we came up with this, the last system of elections, I know several parts are still in court.
Yeah.
States used to produce 3 million, 2-point-something million votes. When they introduced that system, then dropped drastically. And then you see similar things in several other sectors. And so some people actually wonder, if we actually come up with proper data, it will speak to the reality. I mean, we saw that too with fuel consumption. Yep. Now that subsidy is gone, look at the amount of cars on the roads. Dropped drastically. Absolutely. The consumption dropped drastically. That's a real figure. So many would then ask, do you see us actually coming up with that proper data?
It's possible. You know, if it's done somewhere else, and the people that have done it somewhere else, they are not angels. And for us, it trickles down from government. The intention, as your previous speaker said, it trickles down from the intention of government. If government is sincere with getting the data, and if other stakeholders are also focused in driving the conversation about this data, then we'll put the government under pressure, multidimensional pressure.
It's not that difficult to get,
if you allow me. It is not difficult to get the data. It's absolutely not difficult to get the data. But the intention and the desire to do it is probably what is lacking. Some will call it political will to do it. Because if you don't do it, you have created systems for yourself to also game the system that you're trying to protect. So data we create, it's more like a leveler for us, an equalizer. Once you have the data, you can deal with the issue of those that are poor. You can deal, even the labor market information itself that we should have. How many jobs are created on a regular basis. How many people are losing their jobs? How many people must have lost their job last month? What are the rate of new job creation? We don't have credible labor market information. As simple as that.
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, especially looking at it from the angle of employment. But this is not the first attempt of the government to try and give some palliatives. This one, they're doing it through the states. From what we understand, some parts of it will be grants, other parts of it will be loans. But in the president's speech, which he had issued earlier, which he gave earlier, he had talked about the manufacturing sector. I imagine that the manufacturing sector is also captured under the Employers Association. Absolutely. So I don't know, when you talk about framework, have you been able to find out under what framework the federal government intends to spend its 75 billion naira, which it has spoken about, to 75 enterprises before now?
Immediately the president announced those palliatives, those series of interventions. And one of the things we said first, that we can't announce without putting an implementation structure in place. And for us, you have to have a Minister of Trade and Investment to manage the interface with the manufacturers. If you are buying 3,000 buses or 300,000 buses, you need a Minister for Transport to do that interface. For us, if you are talking of the issue of the national minimum wage, we need the Minister for Labour to be on ground to midwife that process. Without those structures in place, they remain announcements, they remain intention. And fortunately, the ministers have been confirmed, portfolios confirmed, inauguration on Monday as we had. And we're hoping that those ministers, once they are confirmed, once they go back to their ministries, then we should start implementation. As far as we are concerned, it's 75 billion, many other interventions, they remain pronouncements until we have that structure, because you need the ministers. You need the boards of agencies and agencies and parastatals. You need them on ground because they are the engine room that will drive that process. But without them on ground, they remain basically government's intention to do.
That's quite telling, because the president gave this speech on the 31st of July. Yeah. This is midway, or we're already more than midway into August. And as a result of a lack of structure to implement this, it's been very difficult for anyone to really know how, the president's plans were going to be actualized.
Before now, everybody was going to the villa with the president's advisors, a series of advisors playing so many roles. But now everybody cannot, manufacturers, transporters, service providers. All of us can be going to the center. It becomes overwhelming even for those around the president to work. So we need that structure. And the Minister of Finance also have to manage the disbursement of these funds. So without all those people in place, the permanent secretaries can absolutely do very little within the context of their role and their functions.
Well, we know that employers are situated in states, apart, of course, from those who are right here in the Federal Capital Territory. Before this announcement by the governors, I mean, after their National Economic Council meeting, have you heard anything from any government that you would have said, okay, this is what we think the number of states too should be looking at implementing before the announcement of yesterday?
Well, everybody was looking at the president,
the federal
government, waiting for pronouncement from the federal government. So you remember, and rightly so, that the states also, most of them also, they go cap in hand to come to Abuja every month to collect allocation, which also compromises their ability to provide effective support to organized businesses. Maybe 1 or 2 or 3 states is creating that environment for organized businesses to survive. So it all boils down to the whole issue of are the state viable? Are the state creative enough? Or are the governments or the governors, are they creative enough to explore or to exploit the resources that they have, both natural and human resources?
Do you think they are?
We have, there's no state you will go to in the country that you won't find one form of natural resources or the other. Nigerians have proved themselves out of this country. People travel from Maiduguri to US, to UK, and they distinguish themselves very well. People travel from the west, from the north, and they distinguish themselves. Now, the question is, what is making them almost frustrated within this environment? We go back to the system. So if the governor is not creating or is not exploiting those resources, and we're all comfortable because we have oil, and oil is already giving us, is creating another dynamics for us, because it's basically all our problems, you solve your problems through revenue from oil, you also create problems for yourself through the same issue of oil. So it becomes a cacophony of issues that you have to sit down and deal with. But those states are viable. We just need a focused government that will make those stakes maximize.
I am extremely disturbed by the fact that you say that no state, or maybe just a handful of states, are holding any consultative meetings with employers of labor to find out what progress they can make and how they can make things easier. Because if the states which are closest to the businesses and closest to the people living in this state are not holding these meetings, is the federal government going to be meeting with every single business in Nigeria to find out how to help them?
Those are the big issues we have to deal with. An average business in this environment is seen like a cash cow. You come, you set up your business, then rather than the government providing the enabling environment first for you to be sustainable, create jobs. The more you create jobs, the more you employ the locals of those community. The more you employ, the more you generate revenue. The issue of personal income tax, you also make revenue from corporate tax. But most of them see organized businesses as a cash cow. So you start a business today, then you have agencies and quasi-agencies of the same state government coming to create serious bottleneck for such businesses.
Yes, but the cow has to be alive for it to continue to give you milk.
It has to be alive.
Yes.
But for many of them, it's so unfortunate that sometimes you wonder if they understand the concept of enterprise sustainability. Because everything, even national development, if you talk of GDP growth, talk of productivity, everything rests on sustainable enterprises. If you don't have sustainable enterprises, then you cannot develop.
Well, let's get to Lagos.
Yes, thank you, Chamberlain. The concern is across board, not just with employers, but also with labor, Mr. Oyerinde. I wonder if, state governors are having conversations with labor as well. And in that regard, there are some classes, in fact, quite a number of classes of Nigerians that are not represented in one form of government structure or agency, the informal sector, you know, those who are daily earners. How can they be captured under this palliative regime? Maybe we should start with that before I follow up.
You know, until we create the nexus and understand the nexus between all these variables, between the employer sustainability, between labor, and also between the average Nigerian, the household, those in the informal sector. Now, let's look at the palliatives or the wage negotiation, wage adjustment that is being championed by labor. If you apportion or you approve 1 million naira as wage adjustment for labor, and each worker is going home with 1 million naira per month. If you don't deal with the issue of the macroeconomy, if you don't deal with the issue of ease of doing business, as the wage is going up, the cost of production will most likely also be going up. So at a point, your increase in wages will be neutralized by the increased cost of living. On the flip side, if you create an environment where businesses are sustainable, where cost of doing business is reducing progressively, it will naturally bring down the cost of goods and services, which will also benefit the workers and also benefit the average Nigerians. The government said they have a data of 133 million Nigerians that are multidimensionally poor. We are hoping, we are seriously hoping that that list is credible enough to capture as many persons as possible. But beyond the issue of the sharing, I think what we should be looking at, as I mentioned earlier, is we got to this point because of the removal of fuel subsidy. Increase in the cost of fuel, increase in the cost of energy, VAT on diesel that has been introduced. Now, how do we create a system where the cost of production will be less or be reducing for those operating at the informal sector? Because if we don't deal with that, you might give 5,000 naira per month, you might give 10,000 naira per month, you might even give 20,000 naira per month as palliatives. We might give each household a bag of rice per month or per year to survive. But if the cost of living continues to rise, it will continue to equalize in the negative, whatever palliatives you are giving Nigerians. So it is less of the sharing of the money, but it's a more fundamental issue of dealing with what are the critical issues that will make businesses more profitable, more sustainable, so that the effect can trickle down to the cost of living. If you don't deal with that, we'll continually be throwing money, we'll continually be throwing cash on problems that we can deal with through appropriate policies and appropriate regulation.
I'm wondering just how fair it will be to leave the informal sector to be at the mercy of the possible positive outcomes, of righting the wrongs in the economy. I believe that they should, somehow be captured under the distribution of the palliatives regime. But following up on, the president's speech, besides the funds that he announced for the manufacturing sector, there was also some funds announced to be distributed to small and medium-scale businesses as well. Should that also be, waiting in the wings for the inauguration of the cabinet? Or shouldn't there have been some form of accountability from the governors on whether or not it is captured under this 5 billion naira intervention fund, or it will be catered to under the increase in the amount accruing to the states from the federation account?
Well, we want to believe that the announcement by the president earlier in August is a different intervention. The amount for the MSMEs, the nano businesses, the amount for the manufacturers, we want to believe strongly that it's different from the 5 billion that will be shared through the states. And for the MSMEs, good intervention, good comment by the president, but we are also concerned about how exactly are we going to generate those MSMEs. Let me give you an example. During the last CBN regime, a lot of interventions were made, a lot of grants were given, a lot of loans were given, purportedly to MSMEs, to SMEs. And we also know that there were reports that there was high rates of default in those loans. And during one of our engagements, when the CBN complained about high rate of default, the question we posed was this: how did you arrive at the MSMEs that you gave the loan? What were the due diligences that was made to make sure that those that actually needs the loan were the ones that collected it? Because we have a platform that is called the Organized Private Sector of Nigeria that has NECA as a member, that has a MAN, Manufacturer Association of Nigeria, that has NASIMA, that has National Association of Small-Scale Enterprises, and National Association of Small-Scale Industrialists. Those 5 organizations constitute what we call the organized private sector.
It raises that question.
You have all strata of businesses represented.
Yeah.
Both in the small and small scale industry, the big industries. And we said, look, why not channel the loan or channel the intervention through this institution?
Well, it raises that question, Mr. Oyerinde, my sincere apologies for butting in. It raises that question of whether or not there is significant engagement, and I think that's one of the questions Malkwe asked you, earlier when we began this conversation. In that light, and talking about the cost of living, let me speak, directly to this one. It's the effect on the private sector that is actually important to me, and the resultant roll-on effect on employment. So given the rising cost of living and naturally rising cost of production, you may want to tell us what percentage cost has risen. Do you see a situation where there will be job cuts? If so, to what degree? Do you see an increase in rate of employment or rate of unemployment? If so, to what degree?
I think it's quite obvious to all of us. The answer to your question is obvious. We have, it's no more news that we have businesses, even multinationals, already relocating or divesting from the country, which is also a result, or partly a result of the inhospitable environment in which they are operating. So once a business is in distress, one of the options available for it is basically to reduce production. And as you reduce production, one of the consequences is either for you to cut jobs. If you don't cut jobs, you have a proper engagement with your stakeholders, including labor, to fashion out how do we navigate ourselves out of this distress. Definitely, one of those consequences, in most cases, is job losses. But for Nigerian employers, we must commend the resilience and doggedness of Nigerian businesses. I remember during COVID, at the height of COVID-19, when businesses were forced to shut down, we actually had an MOU with labor, with NLC TUC, that whatever the case might be, Nigerian employers will not sack workers, except it is absolutely necessary. And when I mean absolutely necessary, when it is absolutely difficult for the business to operate. And we kept to that MOU. And we have kept to that also sufficiently. But you also realize that businesses have stakeholders, they have shareholders, and once the environment becomes very, very inhospitable for you to operate, then you look at how do you survive. And one of those survival modes is either you shut down, you relocate, or you suspend production, which will naturally affect jobs, as it were. And as it affects jobs, it has so many other consequences within the context of our national life. So it's one of those consequences, job loss.
Or maybe they need to, Nigeria need to review that troubled asset recovery program of the states and see how it can improve, and then attend to companies here, because they are the employers. They have to keep businesses going. But absolutely, that's how far we can go. We do thank you for coming on this morning, Wale Smart. All right, so let's take a look at some messages. This is from Solomon. He says about the dollarization of our currency. It's obvious. Even the government is not sincerely ready to help the Naira, he says. NNDPRA still collects dollars for offshore safety permits in Nigeria, and sadly, from Nigerians. Mine, he says, is expiring this month, and I have to buy $135 to renew my permit to work here in Nigeria, and some in Lagos, as Lagos school fees and rent are paid in dollars. Solomon.
Confirming what it is that Mr. Femi Falana raised. Well, take a look at this. Someone says, I want to disagree with Chief Falana on the CBN fixing and dollar rates. We have done that for 40 years plus and it hasn't strengthened the Naira. So why not do something different? However, there are two types of fixing currency rate, fixed and floating. So that's also there as well.
Guess we're going to need some education on that one. There's this one from Dr. Ikpemosa Umavbi. He says, floating the currency of a country that is import dependent is difficult to rationalize. This argument has been made for years, but the government failed to take heed. Proper sequencing of reforms that are informed by research is advised.
Well, we see your mail, your tweet, Richard. Thank you so much for sending it in. Unfortunately, we are completely out of time. Thank you so much for the privilege of your morning this morning. Have a wonderful day and a good weekend ahead. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Indeed, do ensure you have a blessed weekend. I'm Bukola Koka.
We'll see you later tonight on Hard Copy. Thank you for watching. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
I'll be looking at you from behind the scenes. I'm Chamberlain Osod. Goodbye.